If you earn the average Swiss salary, CHF 84,000 a year, what does the housing market actually look like for you? Not the listings, not the brochures, not the figures that appear in bank advertising or government housing reports. The real numbers, what you can realistically buy, what you are realistically excluded from, what the trade-offs look like across different parts of the country, and how your position in 2026 compares to what it would have been 5 years ago. That is what this script covers. Not abstract affordability, the actual arithmetic of one median income in one of the most expensive housing markets in Europe. CHF 84,000 gross per year puts you at approximately the Swiss median salary. It is a respectable income by any international standard. In most European countries, it would be upper middle income. In Switzerland, it is the middle, and the Swiss housing market has a specific, detailed relationship with the middle that is worth understanding before looking at any listing. The middle is where the numbers are most instructive. Not because the situation is worse there, but because it is most representative of the experience of the majority of working Swiss residents. So the following comparisons are built around that anchor. CHF 84,000, one salary, one benchmark, multiple markets, multiple outcomes. Before the comparisons begin, it is worth establishing exactly what CHF 84,000 looks like in practice as a monthly operating, because the Swiss cost of living is not intuitive from the outside. And the gap between gross salary and disposable income is one of the features of Swiss personal finance that most affects housing decisions. CHF 84,000 gross per year translates, after the mandatory deductions, to take-home pay of approximately CHF 4,830 per month. Swiss federal, cantonal, and municipal income taxes on this salary in Zurich total approximately CHF 9,000 to CHF 11,000 per year. AHV Social Security contributions are mandatory. Second pillar BVG pension contributions are also mandatory, typically around 6 to 10% of insured salary, and represent future retirement income rather than current spending capacity. Health insurance premiums in Zurich run CHF 400 to CHF 600 per month. None of these are optional. CHF 4,830 per month is what exists after all mandatory deductions. Everything, housing, food, transport, insurance, savings, comes from that figure. Comparison 1. Renting versus owning in Zurich on a single CHF 84,000 income. If you rent in Zurich at the current market rate, a 2-bedroom apartment in an accessible suburban neighborhood, Altstetten, Schlieren, Oerlikon, costs between CHF 1,800 and CHF 2,400 per month. Call it CHF 2,100 as a reasonable midpoint for a livable modern apartment within a manageable commute. After rent, your remaining monthly budget is CHF 2,730. From that comes health insurance premiums of CHF 400 to CHF 500 per month, groceries of CHF 600 to CHF 700, transport of CHF 150 for a monthly pass plus variable costs, basic household costs, and actual daily living. Realistic annual savings capacity on CHF 84,000 in Zurich. CHF 10,000 to CHF 14,000 per year. Call it CHF 12,000 in a disciplined year with no unexpected expenses. Now consider ownership in the same city. A modest owner-occupied apartment in the Zurich market. 4 rooms, accessible suburb, not premium. Currently trades between CHF 700,000 and CHF 900,000. For this comparison, use CHF 780,000 as a reasonable representative figure. The required deposit is 20%. CHF 156,000 total, of which CHF 78,000 must be liquid personal savings that cannot come from pension funds. At CHF 12,000 per year in savings starting from zero, reaching CHF 78,000 takes 6.5 years. That is 6.5 years of renting in Zurich at CHF 2,100 per month. CHF 164,700 paid in rent over that period, building no equity in order to accumulate the liquid component of a deposit that still requires additional pension fund capital and income qualification. The mortgage on the remaining CHF 624,000, assessed on plus 1% amortization plus 1% maintenance, requires gross income of approximately CHF 112,000 per year. On CHF 84,000, you do not qualify, not marginally, not by a small amount. The required qualifying income is 33% above your actual income. There is no savings rate, no belt tightening, no second job that resolves the income gap. The stress test requires income, not savings. And the income required in Zurich for the lower end of the market exceeds the median Swiss salary by a significant margin. In Zurich, on a median Swiss income, renting is not a choice. It is the structural outcome. The market is not accessible to a single median earner at any reasonable price point within commuting range of the city. Comparison 2. What the same CHF 84,000 salary looks like in Jura versus Zurich. The canton of Jura, in the westernmost part of Switzerland, is one of the most affordable property markets in the country by price-to-income ratio. A detached four-room house with a garden in a commuter village near Delamont, the cantonal capital, sells in the CHF 370,000 to CHF 440,000 range. Use CHF 400,000 as the representative figure. The required deposit, CHF 80,000, of which CHF 40,000 must be liquid savings. At CHF 12,000 in annual savings, CHF 40,000 is reached in 3 years and 4 months. The mortgage on the remaining CHF 320,000, stress-tested at 5% interest plus amortization and maintenance, requires gross income of approximately CHF 57,000 per year. On CHF 84,000, you qualify with significant headroom, as a single earner without a co-applicant with capacity to absorb rate increases and unexpected life costs. The path to ownership in Jura is visible and achievable within a normal savings horizon. The comparison is instructive not because Jura is a hidden bargain, it is well known, but because it quantifies the precise gap between accessible and inaccessible on the same income. The salary that produces 6+ years of deposit accumulation and then fails the stress test in Zurich produces under 4 years of deposit accumulation and comfortable qualification in Jura. The income does not change, the market does. And the gap between those two markets on the same gross salary is the difference between permanent exclusion and realistic ownership. The caveat is practical. Jura is not Zurich. The employment market is smaller, professional opportunities in certain sectors are limited, and the cultural infrastructure is less dense. These are real costs that the property listing cannot capture. But they are personal and variable, which means the market can show only the prices. The rest is left to the individual household to weigh against the property arithmetic. Comparison 3. The Swiss housing market in 2021 versus 2026 on the same income. In 2021, the median price for owner-occupied apartments in the greater Zurich area sat at approximately CHF 870,000. The 20% deposit requirement was CHF 174,000, of which CHF 87,000 had to be liquid savings. The stress test still applied the 5% theoretical rate, but actual mortgage rates were below 1%. On CHF 84,000, a single earner still did not qualify for the Zurich median. The required income for a CHF 696,000 mortgage was approximately CHF 125,000. But the picture in the broader suburban market was somewhat more accessible. In Winterthur, in the Limmat Valley, in the Zurich Oberland, 3- and 4-room apartments could be found in the CHF 550,000 to CHF 650,000 range. A CHF 600,000 property required CHF 60,000 in liquid savings. The stress test on the resulting CHF 480,000 mortgage required gross income of approximately CHF 86,000. On CHF 84,000, within touching distance, some lenders would have considered the application. In 2026, those same properties in the Winterthur and suburban Zurich market trade at CHF 720,000 to CHF 820,000. The deposit requirement on a CHF 760,000 property is CHF 152,000, of which CHF 76,000 must be liquid. The stress test on CHF 608,000 requires gross income of approximately CHF 109,000. On CHF 84,000, the gap has widened from touching distance to a clear 30% shortfall in qualifying income. The window that was barely open in 2021 has closed. Median Swiss wages between 2021 and 2026 grew by approximately 6 to 8% in nominal terms. Residential property prices in the Zurich metropolitan area grew by approximately 18 to 25% across the same period. The income-to-price gap did not narrow, it expanded. and expanded in a period when actual mortgage rates rose from historic lows, meaning the theoretical 5% stress test began to approach the actual rate environment rather than remain firmly above it. The buffer shrank, the prices grew. The accessible window in the Zurich suburban market, which was narrow in 2021, effectively closed for single median earners. The relevant change was not only in price levels, but in the speed at which prices moved relative to income. The Swiss property market has always been expensive relative to median income. What changed in the 2020 to 2023 period was the pace of price appreciation, driven partly by pandemic-era demand for space, partly by sustained low rates, and partly by increased remote work capacity expanding effective demand from Zurich into surrounding cantons. That price surge embedded itself into the market permanently. Prices in the Zurich suburban belt did not retrace when rates rose from 2022 onward. They plateaued at the elevated level. Income did not surge correspondingly. The structural gap widened sharply in 2021 and 2022 and has not closed. Comparison 4. Single income versus dual income on the path to ownership. The difference between a single earner on CHF 84,000 and a dual income household where both partners earn at the median level, CHF 168,000 combined, is the difference between structural exclusion from the Zurich market and conditional access to it. On CHF 168,000 combined gross income, the household qualifies for a mortgage of approximately CHF 1.12 million under the stress test methodology. That is enough to purchase a mid-tier family apartment in the Zurich suburban market. Schlieren, Dietikon, Erdorf, mid-tier Winterthur. The qualification threshold is cleared. The remaining question is the deposit. A dual-income household earning CHF 168,000 combined, living in Zurich, benefits from economies of shared accommodation. Two people sharing a two-bedroom apartment at CHF 2,200 per month with 2 health insurance premiums, 2 transport costs, and the general cost of a shared household can realistically save CHF 22,000 to CHF 28,000 per year under disciplined management. Call it CHF 25,000. To accumulate CHF 90,000 in liquid savings, the personal cash component of a deposit on a CHF 900,000 property takes roughly 3.5 years from zero. Both partners can also contribute second pillar pension funds to the remaining 10% deposit component, reducing the liquid savings requirement further. That 3.5-year timeline is the lived reality for many Swiss couples in their late 20s and 30s who have made a deliberate decision to work toward ownership. 3 to 4 years of combined saving, living at or below their means, with both incomes fully deployed. That is what access looks like in Zurich in 2026. Achievable, but requiring 2 incomes, sustained discipline over a multi-year period, and no significant financial disruption. No career interruption, no medical cost, no parental leave that substantially reduces income during the savings phase. The impact of children on the dual-income ownership equation deserves attention. A dual-income household saving toward ownership in Zurich is, in many cases, a childless couple in their late 20s or early 30s. The moment children arrive, the financial picture shifts. Childcare costs in Zurich are among the highest in the world. A full-time nursery place for one child can cost CHF 2,500 to CHF 3,500 per month depending on the facility and the subsidy the family qualifies for. One partner often reduces hours to part-time. The dual income advantage narrows or disappears. The savings rate collapses. The ownership timeline, which was 3 to 4 years away, extends indefinitely. The CHF 84,000 household earner and their similarly earning partner, who looked like viable Zurich homeowners at 27, can find themselves as long-term renters at 42. Not through financial mismanagement. Through the normal sequence of a life lived in one of the world's most expensive cities. For single-earner households, including single parents, individuals whose partners work part-time due to childcare responsibilities, or people on the median income whose partner earns significantly less, the Zurich market remains structurally inaccessible regardless of savings behavior. The income qualification gap is too wide to close through savings discipline alone. The second income is not a convenience in Zurich, it is a prerequisite. If you want to follow this kind of granular analysis of the Swiss housing market, how access shifts canton by canton, how the income-to-price relationship evolves, and where the actual ownership windows exist, Urban Wealth Atlas covers it every week. Worth following. Comparison 5. What CHF 300,000 in combined deposit capital actually buys across different Swiss cantons. CHF 300,000 in total deposit capital represents a realistic ceiling for a well-prepared Swiss household. Perhaps CHF 150,000 in liquid savings accumulated over a decade of disciplined budgeting, plus CHF 150,000 drawn from 2 BVG second pillar pension accounts. In Zurich, CHF 300,000 as a 20% deposit supports a property purchase of CHF 1.5 million. The stress test on the resulting CHF 1.2 million mortgage requires gross household income of approximately CHF 216,000. For most households that have spent a decade accumulating CHF 300,000 in capital, this income level is not a given. The capital and the income requirements are misaligned. In the canton of Bern, the mid-tier market in the Bernese Mittelland, communities around Bergdorf, Langenthal, Konolfingen, has properties in the CHF 700,000 to CHF 950,000 range, where CHF 300,000 in capital represents more than the required deposit. On a CHF 800,000 property, the deposit requirement is CHF 160,000, well within the available CHF 300,000. The stress test on the remaining CHF 640,000 requires gross income of approximately CHF 115,000, achievable for a dual-income professional household. In Valais, the Alpine canton running from Visp to the communities near Lake Geneva, CHF 300,000 in capital provides access to a significantly larger portion of the property inventory. A detached house in Visp or Brig trades in the CHF 550,000 to CHF 750,000 range. A 4-room apartment in Sion can be found between CHF 400,000 and CHF 600,000. At those prices, CHF 300,000 in capital substantially exceeds what is required for the deposit. The qualifying income on a CHF 400,000 property after a full CHF 80,000 deposit is approximately CHF 57,000. A single earner on the median salary clears that threshold comfortably. The same CHF 300,000 in capital represents no access in central Zurich, conditional access in suburban Bern, and comfortable access across a wide range of Valais properties. Capital is necessary. It is not sufficient. The market you can enter with that capital is determined entirely by the price level of the canton you choose to buy in. Comparison 6. Switzerland versus its immediate neighbors on the same budget. CHF 84,000 per year, approximately Euro 88,000 at current exchange rates, is a high income by European standards. In the Greater Munich area, Germany's most expensive city and arguably its most comparable metropolitan housing market to Zurich, the mortgage qualification system applies different criteria. German banks use actual market interest rates for affordability assessment, not a theoretical stress test rate. In the broader Munich commuter belt, 3- and 4-bedroom houses can be found in the Euro 550,000 to Euro 750,000 range. On a Euro 88,000 annual income, the debt service ratio under German banking convention allows for a larger mortgage than the Swiss stress test methodology would permit on the same income. In Vienna, the same income accesses a market where Euro 350,000 to Euro 500,000 buys a quality 3-room apartment in established inner districts with excellent public transport. Austrian banking qualification criteria are more accommodating of current rate environments. The same budget, same income, similar capital, accesses ownership in Vienna that it cannot access in Zurich. This cross-border comparison demonstrates a specific point. The Swiss access barrier is not primarily a function of income or capital level. It is a function of the specific combination of high prices, strict deposit composition rules, and a theoretical stress test rate that interacts with those prices to produce qualification thresholds that most median income households cannot meet. The barrier is systemic, not intrinsic to the income level itself. To make the rental versus owning arithmetic in Zurich more concrete, over a 6.5-year period of saving toward ownership, The minimum timeline to reach the liquid deposit component on a CHF 780,000 property on CHF 12,000 per year in savings. A renter paying CHF 2,100 per month will have paid CHF 163,800 in rent. That rental cost produces no equity, no appreciation, and no reduction in the property price they are working toward. Meanwhile, the Zurich property market has historically appreciated at 3 to 5% per annum in nominal terms over the past 2 decades. A property priced at CHF 780,000 in year 1 would, at 4% annual appreciation, trade at approximately CHF 1.01 million in year 6.5. The deposit required on that property has grown from CHF 156,000 to CHF 202,000. The saver who begins with CHF 0 and saved CHF 12,000 per year has CHF 78,000. The gap has widened, not closed. This is not a worst-case scenario. It is the baseline arithmetic of the market. Comparison 3 also highlights an important asymmetry in the deposit accumulation problem. When interest rates were low, below 1% between 2015 and 2021, the stress test rate of 5% created a large gap between theoretical and actual mortgage costs. Borrowers who could pass the stress test were paying far less in actual debt service than the stress test assumed. The result was that homeowners who managed to purchase during the low-rate era entered their mortgages with substantial buffer. When rates normalized upward from 2022, those existing homeowners absorbed the shock without distress because they had qualified at the higher theoretical rate. The stress test worked as designed for those who got in. The group it excluded entirely: median earners who could not meet the income threshold even at near-zero actual rates received no benefit from the rate protection. They were excluded regardless of actual rate levels. The dual income comparison in Comparison 4 also conceals a distributional question that the headline numbers obscure. The two-income household on CHF 168,000 combined that can access the Zurich property market is, in practical terms, a household where both partners hold professional or semi-professional roles in the Swiss labor market, both have stable employment, and neither has taken extended career breaks for childcare or other reasons. That describes a subset of Swiss households, probably the upper third of the income distribution, when adjusted for household size and family structure. For the majority of Swiss households who are dual income in some sense, but where the two incomes are not both at or above the median, or where one income is part-time, or where one partner's income is subject to seasonal or contractual variation, the dual income advantage is smaller than the headline figure suggests. The canton of Graubünden, Switzerland's largest canton by area, in the southeastern part of the country, offers a further data point on the capital comparison. The smaller towns of the canton, away from the premium ski resort communes, subject to the Zweitwohnungsgesetz restrictions, offer property pricing that sits significantly below the national median. A family home in Ilanz, Chur's secondary town, or the communities of the Surselva Valley can be found in the CHF 450,000 to CHF 650,000 range. Chur itself, the cantonal capital and the largest city in Graubünden, has properties in the CHF 500,000 to CHF 800,000 range for standard owner-occupied apartments. With CHF 300,000 in combined deposit capital, a household in Chur can access a wide portion of the local market and clear the income qualification without requiring a high dual income. The pattern holds: the same capital that produces no access in Zurich produces meaningful access in every canton where prices have not been driven to Zurich levels. What the comparisons collectively reveal is a specific kind of inequality that does not show up clearly in wealth or income statistics. Switzerland is not a country with a large low-income population struggling to meet basic needs. It has one of the most robust social support systems in Europe and genuine labor market strength. The inequality the housing market produces is access inequality. A gap not between people who have enough to live on and people who do not, but between people who can participate in the wealth-building mechanism of property ownership and people who, due to the structural interaction of price, deposit rules, and stress test methodology, cannot. That gap compounds over decades. The owner in Zurich, who bought in 2005 and sold in 2025, realized equity growth that a renter in the same period did not. The access inequality of 26 is in part the accumulated effect of access inequality at every preceding point in the price cycle. Here is where the comparisons land. CHF 84,000 per year is a salary that by every cross-national measure should provide access to homeownership. In Germany it does, in Austria it does, in Jura, in Valais, in Glarus, in Switzerland's own affordable markets. It does just about, under the right conditions and with sufficient savings discipline. In the markets where the majority of Swiss median earners actually live and work, Zurich and its metropolitan area Geneva, Zug, the same income does not access ownership without a second earner, an inheritance, or an extended accumulation period that encounters no interruption. Not because the income is low, because the prices are high and the rules governing access to those prices have not adapted to reflect that. The gap between what the income should theoretically access and what it actually accesses in the specific markets where it is earned is the defining arithmetic of Swiss housing in 2026. It is not visible in the listings. It is not in the brochures. It is in the stress test calculation, the deposit composition rules, and the price history of every canton where a median Swiss salary happens to be spent.